The next learning moment, number 11 here, is about using database views and accessing the data returned from them into Entity Framework. To be honest, this actually relates back to learning moment 8, where we learned how about doing group by and aggregates in our LINQ itself, right? So just as a note here, LINQ itself is very powerful. And when we have our navigation properties, we can do our dot includes, we can actually create what are essentially very complex queries with very simple code in C# itself, right? Using the dot includes and so on. But there is a point where things do get complicated. Sometimes we don't have navigation properties. Sometimes we have to generate our own joins. Well, a join isn't that bad to do in LINQ. What about outer joins? Then it starts getting pretty ugly. And what if you need subqueries of different types and so on and so forth, multiple grouping levels and things like that? It can get really, really ugly, I have to confess. So sometimes the best solution is go right into the database and create a view that returns all the data that we need, right? We started off learning databases, right, when you first came to the college. And so hopefully a lot of those skills haven't been lost and you know how to quickly put together left joins and subqueries and so on and so forth. And if you do, then you're way to the races, right? Because we can create our views and then just access it with a DbSet in pretty much the normal way. Main difference, of course, is 99.99% of views in the world are read only, right? It's only a very rare exception do you actually have a view that you can do insert, update, or delete, okay? And that's not the case for anything that involves joins and so on. So basically just assume that views are read only. So that's one limitation. It might look like a DB set, like any other DB set, but you won't be able to insert, update, or delete. It's just a matter of retrieving data through it, right? So I have a little copy paste file here. So just with some general notes, first of all, right? Usually we need a view model, okay? And we've seen the value of doing view models anyway, right? So you have a view model holding whatever data is you want to pull from the database, right? And then we'll actually create a DB set for that view model in the normal way we make DB sets right in our DbContext itself. Now to actually associate, here's the key to make the DB set work with our view model and that collection of view model objects work with the data coming from our view in the database. In on-model creating, okay, we use our model builder to identify that this entity, and that's the name of the view model, goes there, will get us data. So we say to view and the name of the actual view in the database, right? Now I've just got two different versions here. Most views that are summarizing data, you don't have a primary key, right? So it's a no key situation. So you just say dot has no key. If there is a key, if there's something that stands out as a candidate to be a unique identifier for each row, then by all means say dot has key and identify the actual property in the view model itself, which will be the key, right? So those are the two different ways you'll basically write this code in the using the model builder. Okay, now we have to actually, once that's in place, we need to actually get the view, the create view statement, to be applied against our database. So we actually have the view there. So often the easiest way to do things, extra steps in our migration, is just to throw that code using the migration builder passed in when we call our extra migration steps the way we're doing it now, right? So you just write your create view statement. Of course, you want to do it so that it works properly. So I would actually generate the select statement just using the interactive tools in Visual Studio working in the database, right? Once you have it worked out so it's returning the data you want, then just say create view and view name as, and then put that above your select statement and you're good. By putting that here in extra steps, it makes it easy then because we're going to have to, we've added a new DB set, we have to create a new migration altogether, right? And we'll basically blow away the database, the migration, recreate the migration, and make sure we've added this extra code here for our creating our view into the extra migration steps, right? So that's it. Then we can start using it. So you can just go to your context, the name of the DB set. Typically, it's a good idea to add the as no tracking because remember, this is read only, right? So we might as well let the system know you don't have to worry about caching anything or tracking for changes because it's strictly read only data. So that will just help performance a little bit. Not the end of the world if you leave it off, but it's a good place to make use of that as no tracking. right? And of course, it is still a LINQ query, so we can do .where clauses, order by, then by, and so on and so forth, right? So you can treat it like any kind of other DB set as far as pulling data. It's just you can't do insert, update, or delete. Okay, so I thought we'd do a quick basic example, and because this relates back to our discussion here about group by and aggregates, I thought we would actually do that very one, right? So remember what we did there is we created our appointment summary view model, right? And so it had information about each patient, first name, middle name, last name, and so on. And then it had summary information about how many appointments have they had, what the total amount of extra fees have been charged, what was the maximum single fee ever charged, and so on and so forth, right? Well, we're going to use the same view model here, but we're going to do it instead of in this LINQ query. Now, I've got to be honest, this was a pretty good LINQ query, and we aren't going to actually see any real performance improvement by doing it as a view in the database. But it's just an easy one. You're familiar with this one example already, so we're just going to convert this to use a database view instead, right? But there's no real need in this case to do so, but why not? It's a good example to use, right? So I'm going to use the same view model. It was already there. We had it created from doing that learning moment. It's in our example. So I've downloaded the latest Medical Office 10.6, I think, okay, where we added the latest features from our learning moments. And so I'm going to start here. We've got that in place. I'm going to go to the context and I'm going to add a DB set, okay, for our actual view model, right? So let me just come here. I'll get Visual Studio up. Okay, and so we'll go to our DB set. So that's, not in controllers, in data, medical office context. And here's all our DB sets. So there we go. So appointment summary, okay, our collection of appointment summaries, right? So notice that, of course, we already have the using for view models namespace up here. So that's good. All right, now in our on model creating, you know what? I'm going to take this out, for heaven's sakes. Never used it yet. I can put it back in if I ever want to. All right, so let me get my code again. So essentially, it's just a matter of having our model builder, okay, create the association between our DB set, okay, our collection of appointment summary objects, and to the appointment summaries query. That's going to be the name we use for the query inside the actual database, and it has a key, right? Because if you remember that particular model, if we go to View Models here, appointment summary, right? We did have this int ID. Okay, it works well. It will actually be in the end the patient ID, right? But it makes for a reasonable unique identifier here for this summary of each patient and how many appointments they've had, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's what we need to do there. So we have to actually write the create statement, right? So I'm going to come down here. Well, maybe, just to show you, like if I go in here, connect to the database. Hello. All right. Of course, things are going to hang up on me. Ah, silly me, trying to connect to the database, but it hasn't been created yet, right? Because I just downloaded this and I removed the database. Okay, so we'll get back to that later. And trust me, for now, it's not hard to come up with your actual code for your view, right? Certainly not in this case. It's pretty much like we did in our LINQ query. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the data folder, right? Here's our extra migration steps, okay? Right now we have code in here to create our 2 triggers for the patient timestamp. So I'm just going to add this bit of code that will actually supply the create view statement that we need, okay? So I'll use the migration builder, say .sql, and then execute this SQL, okay? Create view appointment summaries as, right? So here's my select statement, okay? Notice that I have a join here, right? Patients join appointments, okay, on the patient ID matching the appointment, foreign key patient ID. I've got a group by clause. We're pulling it all out. I'm being careful to use aliases as, right, to match the property names inside my view model itself. Okay, so that's good. So I have that in place. So all we have to do now is delete our migration. There is no database, so I'll just come in here to common commands. We'll execute our add migration command. And hopefully that gets through okay. Yep, we're looking good. Okay, so what I want to do inside the migration, let me just shrink it down. I'll set my insertion point at the beginning of the down, up 3 times, 1, 2, 3, go to the end of the line and make some white space. So now I can put in my call here to X migration steps, passing the migration builder that we're using. All right, so that will, when I run this project and it executes this migration, it will actually add not only those triggers, but also the create view statement. Okay. All right, so I'll just clean up the screen here a little bit. And that's it. So basically I could run it and force all that, but it'll happen when I run it next. So let me just go back to that. I believe I put it in the home controller, right? So if I come to controllers, home, yeah, here's where we threw that in. So we created this APPT summary action result here, right? I have an authorized attribute on it. Maybe I'm going to comment that out for now so I can go there without having to log in. Okay. And so basically, instead of all that, all we really need is return view and our simple LINQ query, right? Using our new DbSet. So clean up all this code. Just say return view context underscore context appointment summaries, adding as no tracking to list. And that's all there is to it. So let's just run it and see that actually work. Okay, so I'm up and going. I should be able to come home, appointment summary, and bada bing, bada boom. Okay, I found my problem. I forgot that I had commented out all this code inside program.cs after publishing it to Azure. So yeah, not so clever, David. There we go. So now it will actually generate the database, see the data and everything. So it should be a little bit more successful this time. Silly me. All righty. Taking a little longer because it's generating the database, seeding all the data. Okay, now we're up and running. So hopefully this time, let's see, there we are. So actually it should look pretty much the same. It's our appointment summary data. And the neat thing is we're getting it all in one trip to the database, getting it all, just pulling it from an actual view stored in the database itself, right? Just to show you that, if I come over here, I'll just refresh the connection to our medical office. So there's the view itself, right? So, you know, if I just come in, I can do, for example, select star from appointment summaries. Oh, execute that, and there we see the output there. So, you know, you can work in here. You can. That's how actually I wrote the queries themselves. As I, you know, did the select statement for the query, which I think get from here. And if I script as create, right? So there, that's how I wrote it. It was right here, and then added create view once I tested the select. I can just run the select, right, without the create view, and just make sure if I don't want to make any modifications, get it done, and away we go. All right, so we'll do a more complex one, but I'll save that for the next recording.